Welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. I'm Johannon Ben-Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem. And it's this time when we discuss concepts in cybernetic communism, which should not be such a strange or frightening turn of phrase. Cybernetics is simply the use of systems to accommodate societal needs. Unfortunately, that's not generally done with the present day cybernetics, and so we need to build what is the work of the communist, which would tend to be more the scare word there, but it shouldn't be. Communist is merely someone willing to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system on a planet where human beings will soon be extinct. At some point, our fate will be sealed after 2029. Our fate will be sealed after 2029. We do not change the industrial bases of the West, most particularly those of the United States, most particularly abolishing the super-polluting military-industrial complex, an abomination unlike any other. It's the world's worst polluter, but it's much, much worse than that because its only real job on the world stage is to protect all of the other super-polluting concerns and other bourgeois government functions in other parts of the world, creating an inescapable regime of super pollution, force marching us all to our demise. No one has a very good idea about what to do to avoid the capitalist climate apocalypse. But your comrades, people willing to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system, communists, have understood this for many, 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 many decades. That capitalism, over time, will destroy the things that it needs to maintain the system, namely the worker, who it weakens, and murders through various social murders or outright murders, and the natural world on which we all rely. There is no point in discussing a society without an ecosystem that it can sustain human life. And yes, these are things that fall squarely at the feet of the United States by the standard of just a few decades ago, the mid to late 20th century. A study suggested that 65% of the total global environmental impact came specifically from the United States. And today, that impact is not lessened on the part of the United States, but only other countries have developed, and so this country that is 4% of the world's population still has very much an outsized impact there. Its own government, military being the world's worst polluter, for example. But somehow this is downplayed in the public imagination. I don't know how that's possible, but it's a tremendous amount of bourgeois propaganda at work there. And so today, the 9% of people who make up the European descended person generally account for about 81% by some studies of the total environmental impact. Now, this is not a sustainable way to live on this planet, so we have to organize in such a way as a species to stop these military industrial complexes, which tend to kowtow to the U.S. militaristic endeavors. And we have to transform these other offending sectors, most particularly the near abolition. Short of causing supply chain collapses, we can get rid of fossil fuel products, about 98% of them, without causing supply chain collapses and things necessaries of life like food. And also the dramatic reconception of food systems, um, um, livestock systems, factory farms, and such. Use up 45% of the arable land on Earth, again, supplying a luxury product to those 9% of people, the European descended person. It is a luxury product. I just ate a cheeseburger that was made out of things not animal based, a plant based cheeseburger. Tasted exactly like the cheeseburger that you might have eaten, but what it didn't have is a tremendously negative environmental impact, nor did it harm any creature. We have to be willing to do some serious soul searching here because I very rarely meet a person describing themselves even as a scientific socialist or scientific communist who does not become a rabid fascist when the subject of livestock systems and their abolition comes up. And this livestock systems, by another study, are 51%, so worse than fossil fuels. 51% of the total environmental impact. I don't think that's a very good way to look at it because the U.S. military industrial complex is effectively the keystone holding this global inescapable regime of super pollution in place. And it itself is not a major consumer of animal products, really, but it is a huge consumer of its status of being the world's worst polluter is because of its use of fossil fuel products. And removing military industrial complexes and reconceiving those other sectors is extremely important. And there is no bioremediation strategy, things like carbon capture. There is no greenwashing strategy that will even begin to address this in the approximately 4 years that we have left before all, possibly all multicellular life, certainly all mammalian life or primate life, human beings or primates. You're a primate, you're not a magical creature, um, are the walking dead after 2029. There will be no path to maintaining the existence of the human species after that time. You won't all just drop dead at that point, but that will nevertheless be the situation. And so there is a way to discuss this um, that is more informed by 21st century developments, and that is the building of a people's superintelligence. And I will give you some ideas in broadest of strokes for this now. Have you ever thought about how technology might help us to solve some of these world's biggest problems? Not just climate change, but the other ravages of private capital. We describe problems as if they are things unto themselves, but these are the fruits of private wealth. And we can make sure that everyone has access to good health care by building an AI-powered single-payer public health service in every land, for example, and build a world that, by being both sustainable and equitable, is a world that is livable for all moving forward. We have very powerful AI, advanced computing, software and developments made by big companies, but their focus is only on making money. Overwhelmingly, and they are also, in the US particularly, very, very closely associated with the very militaristic abomination, the military industrial complex, that I just described a moment ago. Every big company that you've heard of in tech, practically, certainly to do with advanced computing, it dovetails very, very nicely with, not so nicely, with this military industrial complex. But what if we could use those advanced computing technologies, which are undoubtedly the most powerful revolutionary weapon in history. They're being used to counter revolutionary and destructive ends at present. But what if we could use that same technology instead for the benefit of the masses by making it a thing of the masses? And that is what I'm talking about when I talk about a people's superintelligence, particularly what I call the Vanguard Network for people's superintelligence. And that might sound a little bit like it could be science fiction, but it is based on present day technology, widely accessible around the world, namely open source large language models that we could start building into a massified form that is a open source large language model work group that would be a workforce multiplier, allowing people to accomplish more as a society than is at present possible, and certainly as is at present possible under the living under the ecocide caused by private wealth and empire. Um, and so, um, imagine that you have this downloaded this application, this open source large language model, specially tailored to work with other large language models, and all to be steered by yourself as a comrade user, in much the same way that you write prompts to similar open source large language model assistants that are not massified today. So imagine now that there is a team of these super smart AI assistants working together to tackle complex problems. This team, when it reaches a certain size and scale, would be something that would be capable by the disbanding of the military industrial complex and the bringing of these other offending sectors to heel, to build a livable world for us and to tackle other comparable complex problems or even more complex problems. That is essentially what we must create by building this people's superintelligence. And we can refer to these LLM open source models as AI agents. And that would be large language models. And you can think of large language models as the brains of these agents, able to well understand and generate human like text, code, and ideas. And we are turning a corner as we move into 2025, where these open source LLM models have gone from something that you can download to your computer to do some useful research, a capable research assistant, to the thing that is truly an AI agent, which is able to plan, understand its behavior, have similar insights and human level activities. And so you could, in a certain sense, begin to think of this thing as a comrade and not merely an application. I do not suggest that you anthropomorphize technology too much, but for practical purposes, that is the case. So here's an interesting thing then. We can modify this uniquely powerful open source software and build a community even today using these AI agents, which the open source AI agents are not generally held to be what is referred to as artificially generally intelligent. That is, absolutely possessing skills equivalent to those of human beings. But even though they fall short of that, although the highest end of large language models, which are held by private concerns, unfortunately, do have passed these kinds of tests, like the Turing test. Just in recent months, you can look for, search the term artificial general intelligence and see that our LLMs generally are passing this benchmark as we speak. But even though the open source large language models most readily available for modification might not be at quite that level. They are nevertheless agentic enough to be built into this mass form, uh, this larger network that we would call the people's superintelligence. So even though superintelligence generally is a higher form than general intelligence, we can use a thing that is sub AGI to build something that is pushing up to being, or at least an incipient superintelligence, and a thing which would quite quickly become a full-fledged superintelligence as it continues to be built. Um, and one focus of such a group in its earliest stages would be on something which would effectively be AI recursion, that is continuing to improve itself while maintaining as many human beings as will participate in that loop. That is an absolute necessity. At present, open source large language models and large language models generally will do something called AI hallucination, where they will become confused or begin to work less effectively or be unproductive in other ways quite quickly if not steered by human beings. So it is a necessity at this time, if building something that would be truly super intelligent, which is not what the for-profit concerns are building. They are building super-powered militaristic stupidity. But it would be necessary to have people involved, which is why people would download this portal and respond to maybe as few as a handful of yes or no prompts throughout the course of a week, but at a scale, this agentic mass and the people who are steering it would be doing extraordinary work, even though you individually might only be required to answer a few yes or no questions in any given week. And this, but even if, say, in a few years' time, the problem of AI hallucination were a thing of the past, the essential goal of involving a large number of peoples in this process of steering and building superintelligence would have to remain. Generally, when AI doomers are talking about the problems of artificial general intelligence, they are talking about a lack of this, a lack of real human oversight, a lack of transparency on the part of the for-profit and militaristic concerns who control this. So by and large, AI doomers are describing advanced computing as an existential risk to humanity, but really what they're describing is the long-standing existential risk of capitalism. But because almost all of these people are themselves pro-capitalistic, they confuse the matter by describing AI as a force unto itself, as a thing which is going to have agency unto itself. We're describing, of course, AI agency in this conversation, but no matter how much a large language model becomes agentic, there are still people who own and control that, who are themselves the larger power there. And technologists and technophiles of the US and West generally are doing something quite duplicitous, quite deceptive when they talk about this, because they are not acknowledging that that these forces of private wealth and these forces of a CIA-run world are actually the ones who are steering this superpowered super stupidity, but they refer to superintelligence as a thing which is somehow separate from human affairs and will have a mind of its own, the Terminator problem, Of course, that is absurd. The problem is capitalism. And um, this people's superintelligence can do an awful lot of work besides growing to the strength and scale to be able to challenge these offending sectors, such as necessarily dismantling the U.S. military-industrial complex. It can analyze huge amounts of data to be working on human wellness, cures for diseases, and similar concerns. And this power becomes far greater when we build a people's superintelligence that is, by its nature, transparent and human centered, and also um, involving many, many millions of people. It becomes a dramatic workforce multiplier and force multiplier in those other contexts. Um, so not only at that point can we do the most pressing part of building a livable world, stopping the super polluters, but we can once that basic benchmark of sustainability is met, begin to build efficient green energy systems to make our world more livable still. Um, Similarly, um, educators can use this kind of advanced computing to create personalized learning experiences for students, will allow them to understand their place in this very confusing 21st century, just as this people's superintelligence itself will give the masses um, a feeling of belonging and and usefulness in those contexts. And because it is open source, because it is transparent and held in common, and human centered, everyone can participate and everyone can benefit dramatically from these advancements. When this thing reaches about 100 million users, we will have been able to address the problem of the capitalist climate apocalypse. And at that point, with 100 million users or more, we will have something that could be the basis for the distribution and orchestration of the provisioning of universal basic services on every continent. Um, and people worry again about advanced computing, so-called AI, getting out of control in various ways, and that's a valid concern. This field of AI alignment, unfortunately, as I said, is dominated by people who are operating in bad faith, who are not actually addressing the real problems of financial capital and empire that have driven these misalignments so far. And so by flipping the script and focusing on a people's superintelligence, we can be assured that we build something that is aligned with human values and works toward goals that benefit everyone. Um, Many technologists, another sin of technophiles and technologists, is referring to something called that they refer to as a technological singularity, as something that will derive from this current military and neoliberal dominated tech sectors. That is a lie. The idea that full automation in one sector will lead to great benefits for everyone. The United States has had full automation or near full automation in a number of sectors already, and that has not proved to be the case. For example, farming, which before it became highly automated, farming in the United States relied on the labor of new African people, that is, African Americans, the new African nation. And in fact, for many, many years, as we all well know, people were held in bondage, and 100% of their labor value was stolen. They received no pay. This was a system of chattel slavery, and in the late 1800s and early 1900s, Many of these people, instead of being unpaid farm workers, were extremely low-paid farm workers, sharecroppers. Um, and when this transition was made in the decades to follow to a full automation farming sector, if what the technophiles and techno-optimists and folks like this, transhumanists and effective accelerationists, if what they were saying about full automation were true under capitalism, these people would have become equal stakeholders in this highly automated form. But the opposite happened. What happened was they lost those jobs, and because of automation generally, were not provided with other jobs, and because of the racist economic system of the United States, this neoliberal system, were not provided with even the basic necessaries of life, a social safety net to allow them to transition to other fields. This is all quite intentional. You can read a book, a long form pamphlet called the Powell Memorandum, and see how this was planned by white supremacists, by Eurocentric lunatics of the United States, specifically to harm workers and build this system of present day wage slavery. There is no such thing as a technological singularity, except under these built on these principles of cybernetic communism, particularly the people's superintelligence, the open source large language modifier, large language model network as um, a workforce multiplier. Um, the major hurdle to all of this is, of course, scaling. The open source large language model, the tweaks that would need to be made to build this agentic mass with many people interacting within it would not be nearly so great as the cultural hurdle of getting the necessary number of people involved in that process. It's a pretty small thing. If you've used open source large language models on your computer, you know that there's already a prompt page when you use that application, and that there is already some network capacity built in to these applications. So it's a relatively simple matter of turning that into this massified phenomena. But what is not a simple matter is getting millions and millions of people working together in these ways. That is what we must do. That is why a few times a week, I'm posting videos like this where I talk about this and share it in different groups and things. Because I think this cybernetic communist tech evangelism is a more important work, perhaps at this stage, than the building of the technology itself, and there's fewer people doing it. In a video from around this time last year, I talked about how initiatives like the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative could be built into a cybernetic socialist project, and I referred to that as BRICS for the 21st century. That is a Belt and Road Initiative to cybernetic socialism. Consider that there are as many as 1.5 million individuals in the larger Beijing area alone that have GPU machines that could be hosting this workforce multiplier right now. For all you or I know, there are student groups or open source enthusiasts or blockchain enthusiasts working on this very project in that very city, already building the rudiments of a people's superintelligence. And this could not in every nation necessarily, but perhaps in a place like China, become a very powerful state project that would um, quite quickly lead to something like leapfrogging of a non-Western country by the strength of the people's superintelligence over the historically dominant Western powers. Um, I've described how this effect quite nearly occurred in the 1970s in Salvador Allende's Chile. Salvador Allende was an elected Marxist-Leninist leader who had made a number of significant reforms consistent with that of state socialism in the times that he was president. And by 1971, that country had greenlit the building of a technological planned economy, a very novel form of a governance structure. Um, but when the militaristic and oppressive United States and the Western powers that it's allied with became aware of this, they conspired to overthrow that government and installed a literal fascist dictator, Pinochet, who killed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people to stop this thing from happening. Specifically, a technological planned economy, which would have been a springboard for some other path to a people's superintelligence. Probably not with the same machine learning as we understand it today in that alternate history, but nevertheless, a springboard to people's superintelligence. They stopped this AI takeoff from occurring in the 1970s, which is almost certainly what would have happened as the model of a technological planned economy inspired other countries to build similar things. You can say a very similar thing about the very suspicious and illegal dismantling of the USSR occurring at precisely the moment when network computing was becoming a commonplace around the world. The USSR also had plans not dissimilar from the cybersyn in Chile called OGAS, OGAS, and that program was not greenlit in the way that was not literally being built in the way that cybersyn was between 1971 and 1973. But you can bet that as the people of the world became aware that we were living in this networked era, that the Soviet Union would have quickly pivoted to building a technological planned economy. And that, I believe, is one of the major unacknowledged reasons that the USSR was illegally disbanded by the USA and its fascistic allies at the time that it was. Um, there is a lot of technical work required of us to build something like a vanguard network for the people's superintelligence, and that should not be understated. There's few models by which this could be done. Um, as I described, we could have individuals with GPUs, more powerful than average kind of personal computer, um, setting up in this more ad hoc array. It's also possible to build a portal of a more web-based kind that would be using virtual GPUs. This portal would probably be based on a kind of technology like that upholding Twitter.com, a progressive web application that would allow the integration of virtual GPUs and so allow virtually any machine, not just those with actual GPUs on them, to participate quite thoroughly with this. I don't have a strong preference for either of these models, the virtual GPU or the physically hosted LLM on a GPU machine. There's a case to be made for both. The progressive web application would require more significant development and resources to begin work. Um, it's necessary, of course, by those models to create secure networks for those computers to communicate and be used safely by the user comrades. And it's necessary then to undertake the task of developing that software, the modifications, and further development of the open source software that would allow for these tasks to be distributed across so many work groups and machines, sub work groups and machines, and be operating efficiently in those ways. I believe that it's worth it because I think that by working together as a species, we can create a future where advanced computing empowers humanity and builds a livable world, which necessarily requires a just and equitable world, a sustainable world, and that necessarily requires a humane and sustainable economic system, this thing that we must build before it's too late. I ask you to be a part of our new community. If you're interested in advanced computing or not, you don't have to have a background in AI or technology to be a supporter of this idea, become a fellow cybernetic communist tech evangelist. Please reach out to me or anyone else that you see sharing this artwork about the Vanguard Network, and I will add your name to the interest list. And we can build this future where humanity does not um, um, meet its end in a few short decades, but becomes a thing quite different. This people's superintelligence would be something very different from existing bourgeois states or corporations, more powerful. For example, I alluded to the idea of an AI run um, public health service that is, of course, single payer. That's a necessity of a public health service doing the basic work of providing for its people. But an AI run single payer public health service could go beyond treating illness to the point where people live to 85 and could be treating more and more illnesses by this force multiplying effect of advanced computing, and even beginning to address the problems of decrepitude, leading to a population that has reached a thing called longevity escape velocity, leading to everyone living as long as they want. Universal super longevity, the term that I coined to describe that. And this, you might say, I don't want to live forever, but I don't think if you say that, you're really being very honest, because you're already living on this longevity escape velocity principle. You drank sufficient water to remain alive today. You had sufficient food this week to remain alive. If your doctor emails you and says, I'm a little concerned about this, you need to come in for a checkup, you're going to probably do that pretty quickly. You're already living on this universal super longevity principle, so this is largely a question then of systems, which would not change your lifestyle none too much. And even this benefit of universal super longevity deriving from a people's superintelligence is quite simple and straightforward relative to the kinds of effects that we could see in the course of the 21st century as we build and strengthen a people's superintelligence. We can do the necessaries of taking care of one another and stopping the climate apocalypse. And when this is done, when human misery and want is a thing of the past, we could build a spacefaring civilization, build these things that otherwise would be associated with pushing up on the Kardashev scale, that is building a civilization more like that of a space age society. And so I leave you with these words that I often like to repeat. The artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind